Okay, picture this. You've just wrapped up a massive research project. You're staring at hours of messy, rambling interview recordings and a literal mountain of thick teaching modules. It's a terrifying amount of unstructured info, and you've got a looming deadline to make sense of the whole shebang. It's enough to make anyone lose their mind, right? Well, today, we're going to look at a highly structured, reliable solution to completely conquer that chaos. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're decoding qualitative data using a frankly brilliant framework known as John W. Cresswell's Data Analysis Spiral Model. We're going to see exactly how this model takes raw, overwhelming information and transforms it into crystal clear, validated insights. So, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll cover the data analysis spiral, organizing and memoing, classifying themes, representing findings, and finally, validating data. Section 1, the Data Analysis Spiral. Now, Cresswell's data analysis spiral is a pretty fascinating concept. Traditionally, we kind of like to think of tasks as a linear checklist, right? You do step A, then step B, and you never look back. But qualitative data, it's way too complex for that. Cresswell actually argues that researchers move through analytical stages in a spiral. You enter at the wide top with all that raw data, and as you loop around and around through the stages, you're continuously revisiting the information. You shrink the radius, and you refine your understanding until you hit that concentrated core of your findings. To make this abstract methodology completely concrete for us today, we're going to apply it to a real-world case study. This study focuses on TPAC, which stands for Technological, Pedagogical, and Content Knowledge. Basically, it's the framework student teachers use to figure out how to perfectly blend technology, teaching methods, and subject matter. In this specific case, English language teaching. We're going to watch exactly how the spiral makes sense of these student teachers' experiences. So, this continuous spiral breaks down into 4 distinct, digestible stages: organizing data, reading and memoing, classifying into themes, and representing findings. That's our high-level view from start to finish. Section 2, organizing and memoing data. Okay, so at the wide, messy top of our data funnel, you first have to wrangle your materials. This is the organizing and preparing stage. In our TPAC study, this meant the researcher first had to transcribe all those audio recordings of semi-structured interviews into written text. Then, they had to compile all the physical teaching modules, which are referred to here as Module AJAR, collected from the participants. Everything is meticulously organized by the specific participant and arranged systematically. I know it sounds like basic housekeeping, but honestly, this systematic organization is the absolute vital foundation before any real analysis can even begin. Once everything is organized, we hit the reading and memoing stage. And the researcher doesn't just read the transcripts once. No way. They read them repeatedly. This is where you first start identifying those overarching patterns. While reading, the researcher writes notes and reflections, called memos, on important ideas, recurring patterns, and specific issues related to how these student teachers understand and implement the TPAC framework. It's really the first true spark of insight in the whole spiral. Section 3, classifying data into themes. During this stage, the data gets broken down and coded based on TPAC components, like planning, implementing, and reflecting. For example, the letter P stands for planning. SLO narrows that down to selecting learning objectives. R1 identifies the specific respondent from the interview data, and MA points to the document data, specifically the module AJAR. It's almost like building a decoder ring for your data. To see this actually in action, let's compare 2 of these codes. Take P/SLR1. This tells the researcher immediately that this piece of data is about planning and selecting learning objectives, and it came directly out of respondent 1's interview. Now compare that to P/MA/R1. This is the exact same planning and learning objective concept for the exact same respondent, but that MA tells us this evidence was found written in their physical teaching document, their module AJAR. This shows exactly how a researcher can track the exact same conceptual thread across entirely different data sources. Pretty cool, right? Now watch how this builds from those granular codes into actual findings. First, the researcher identifies important statements using those codes. Next, they group those highly specific codes into broader categories. And finally, those categories are integrated and conceptualized into overarching themes. This synthesis process is where the magic actually happens. Those tiny little data points are rolled up into the final themes that allow the researcher to interpret the data and answer the big research questions about how student teachers are integrating technology into their English lessons. Section 4, representing the final findings. So you might be wondering, what does the final output of all this work actually look like?
Well, it is definitely not a giant spreadsheet of alphanumeric codes. The final stage of the spiral involves presenting the findings as a rich, descriptive narrative. This narrative is systematically organized by the themes we just talked about, but it's brought to life and supported by direct excerpts from the participants' interviews and hard evidence from their teaching modules. It creates a really compelling, evidence-backed story that comprehensively describes the student-teacher's real experiences.
Section 5. Validating the research data. But hold on, how do we know this narrative isn't just the researcher's biased opinion? Well, a key quote from the research hits the nail on the head. Validation is about defending your work. Because qualitative research relies so heavily on interpretation, proving the credibility, accuracy, and trustworthiness of your findings is absolutely vital. Like, if you can't validate it, your data honestly doesn't mean much. But according to Creswell, there are highly specific strategies to do exactly this. In this study, the researcher used two primary validation strategies. First up is triangulation. This is where the researcher compares data from completely different sources. For instance, cross-referencing what a participant actually said in an interview with what they wrote in their Modulage Our Teaching artifact, just to verify consistency. The second strategy is member checking. This one goes directly back to the human source. The researcher takes the transcripts or the finding summaries right back to the participants and simply asks, "Hey, did I get this right? Does this accurately reflect what you meant?" It's a great way to massively reduce the chance of the researcher misinterpreting things. And that completes our journey down the Creswell data analysis spiral. We went from messy, disorganized interviews all the way to a validated thematic narrative. I want to leave you with this thought today. When you are presented with qualitative findings, reports, or even customer feedback in your own profession, how do you validate the themes? Are you actually checking multiple sources? Are you verifying with the people involved? Challenge yourself to apply the rigor of this spiral model to ensure the data you rely on isn't just some subjective opinion, but a credible fact. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.